This is part 2 of the psychiatric story. So, after I woke up in the psychiatry, which by the way, kind of I can remember as a big cloud. Like I obviously don't remember clearly everything that happened right after I woke up, including going for water, and I cannot remember sleeping either, which obviously wasn't a very recovering sleep. It was just a coma of some kind, and it was not profoundly self-regenerating sleep involving autophagy, which should have been the case had I slept on an empty stomach for 4 days without any drugs in my body. Now, after I woke up though, I just remember being in the closed unit, as we call it, and I immediately start working out again, almost as though I was at home. I remember having got vegan meals every time for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. By the way, at these institutions, these meal times are very regular, and I was surprised to see how organized they were with the meals. Not at the open unit, but at the closed unit, because the most critical of people there are, so they are there, right? So they must be organized with at least the way that they feed the people there, because that will determine the quality of even their mood. So I got regular meals, they were vegan, and to tell you the truth, I don't even remember I chose vegan. I just remember I was surprised to eat vegan, but grateful as well. I also remember being very just indecisive and questioning about how I got here. Like, it was at that time when I felt the breaking point of me being so Christian that I hold my other cheek to the policewoman, that I am actually saying out with my mouth the word, I belong to the psychiatry, so that I do not have to admit in front of her that I belong to my mother. Hence, I would be willing to go back home with her at 2 a.m., right? Now, I remember eating these vegan meals and feeling so good as a result, but definitely not feeling like I needed meat. And the workouts are actually what kept me alive. I feel like I would have genuinely just laid in bed all day had I not had the workouts in. And even the workouts, I remember I did so weekly, but it's not that I did less workout. It's not that I worked out less. I generally work out at least every 2 or 3 days for 30 minutes, because that is the length which activates autophagy, which renews your cells. But one thing I do remember is I had someone there already. He just came back from the UK, so from abroad, And so did I, because I had been to an island at the beginning of this year, and I was a bit homesick, to tell you the truth. So I came home, but I was even more homesick in here. Like I was feeling like I never belonged here, and yet like I was addicted to this place. Like this is the only place where I could sleep and would be even allowed to sleep. And when I say this, I mean it. Like, I am a woman, I have a period, I really need a lot of sleep before it. Every month. So, I remember just being with this guy at the psychiatric unit, and he was very compassionate. He told me a few days after, or a few days before we went out to the open unit, he told me that my first words after I woke up from the coma were directed to him, and they were, "Are you working here? Like, do you work here?" And he was the first person who saw me after I woke up. Gosh, I must have looked so tired, but what I do remember about him was that he was the best workout buddy I ever had, because during the time when I could barely even walk to the door, not because, I was already weak before I get in the institution, but because they made me so weak. I remember the only time I enjoyed those workouts was when I worked out with him, because I felt like I belonged to him. Like, I felt like I had community there. And I think those thoughts can actually be quite dangerous in the real world, because when you later get outside and realize that you do not belong to those people, you subconsciously may want to go back there. But I have not been there again. But I am just warning myself basically now that maybe I should be careful with those thoughts of belonging, because I feel like in the modern world, unless you really go to school and or have a family or community that is physically there where you sleep every day, it is easy to be consumed by the fact that you actually belong to a society which involves meeting new people every day. So it's like a pseudo belonging. It is not. But even it is not real. But even in a psychiatry, you can find belonging, which is really so much unlike society. Like, you see people there over and over again, wake up, look forward to something every day. So this is basically my experience in the closed unit. And then when I got out, I remember previously I had been writing these lists and lists of gratitude items, and I remember reverting back to basic, old, and useful habits such as reading. I was fortunate enough to have a friend there whom actually I had known from the mother of whom I had actually known from a Christian organization, but not from church, because this is a type of Christianity that does not have churches. So I attended one of the classes, which was held by the mother of the person who ended up at the psychiatry herself. And so she just so happened to have a Bible, and I start reading there like crazy. I read like 1/4 of the Bible there, just at the closed unit, if I remember correctly, and I started writing. I remember I could not at first use my right hand, which is kind of ironic because I am a writer, so I have been writing for years with my right hand because that has been most effective, efficient, and functional. So I remember trying to write with my left hand and eat with my left hand and do everything with my left hand because my right hand wasn't working. So I read, I worked out, I wrote gratitude journal, which I am genuinely convinced to this day that it was the reason I even came out the first time, and it was why I felt like I survived. If you're listening to this and think survival is enough, I want to question you seriously, because having survived what I survived, I can genuinely challenge you with survival is not enough, because thriving is so much more important, and thriving also makes survival easier. So I remember just being there, writing these gratitude lists, and just preparing to even have clean hair by the time that the doctors came around, which is every 2 days or so, 2 to 3 days, and the whole psychiatric unit's doctors would come and pass all the beds one by one. But every time you would just experience the extreme responsibility for yourself with how you represented yourself there. And I feel like me putting foundation on the side of my nose so it didn't look as tired and worn from the lack of sleep I had there. I remember working out and fasting before those doctors came and writing those lists of gratitude, which nowadays I just don't feel like the energy doing. But I know I would do good by writing the gratitude, but my right hand is just so done at this point, so it's harder. But part of the reasons why I can hardly write is because of that very week or so when I got into the psychiatry before, because one night I slept sparingly, so I decided to go back home. But again, there were no trains, so it was the dead of winter, so I went back home, but then I realized, wait, it's cold. And I find myself basically freezing my own hands. Now, that's not something I want you to do. I was wearing the warmest gloves I ever had, and I worked as a bicycle messenger in the capital during winter a few years earlier, so I thought that the gloves would be enough, but they weren't. So now I'm just preparing myself to basically leave this earth as soon as possible, not because I am suicidal primarily, but because I just don't feel like living like this with all my symptoms and illnesses coming out and renewing when I am above 60 years old, say, I would enjoy life as much. And I know that there are many adults in their prime who maybe do not even have the ability to move, but this comparative gratitude, which compares you to people who are in a worse situation, I do not think that works, because you deserve the right to be heard. You deserve the right to express yourself and have the emotions that you have, be them good or bad, and by you acknowledging that they exist, you do not push the bad away, right? And then from there you can start working out a solution, but it is not like you get to push away all the negative and then focus on the positive, because that is toxic positivity. So I don't believe in the type of gratitude that looks at other people and tells you, oh, people are dying or something, and then so you must be grateful. Because gratitude, first of all, is really optional, and that is what makes it powerful, because appreciation is the most abundant tool on the planet, and yet it is so underused sometimes that the people who are grateful get the most in life because other people are not grateful. It is not because the grateful people are so special, it is because the rest of the population is just not aware of what the grateful are aware of. So, one thing I want to add here is, it has been a while since I experienced the type of belonging I experienced at the hospital in the psychiatric unit, because when I got out in the open unit, there were people there who actually chose to went there more so than I did, who started at the closed unit. For example, I had a woman there who were having an upcoming court session because she was discussing deals, law, and rights with regards to her property, which according to law belonged to both her and her partner, because they had been living together, but actually the property had been purchased by the woman. So now she just wanted to prevent that man from taking everything. So I know that a lot of divorce courts are about the woman taking everything, but this was the opposite. And so she started self-medicating, and then obviously because she was not obviously but because she was lucky to have a psychologist who advised her to go to the psychiatry and get medicated there, she ended up there. But I feel like this was a much more conscious decision on her part than mine. And another example is a woman. She was a mother with multiple children and maybe even a husband. She was also Christian, attending a group every weekend. She had been very well mannered and just very polite, extremely kind, talkative, generous, holy, but she saw herself in me, in my situation. She had been to the closed unit twice. She said she never remembered any of that, but once she got out, she went back to the open unit for the third time because she wanted to adjust her medications. So she went there by choice, in fearing prevention that she would get back to the closed unit again. I'm not surprised because people who have been through things usually go through similar things, if not the same things again, because of the law of attraction. So this woman is no different, but this time she had fear of God, I guess, in an unprecedented way. And there was another roommate I had who had an addiction. I'm not going to detail with that because these are really, 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 really sensitive topics, like the most sensitive that there is, but I saw a lot, and seeing people on the bottom kind of both made me get me out of my comfort zone, and it also opened my perspectives a little bit, because even though I had gone to 5 different middle school classes because my parents were just keen on finding the perfect match, I never ever saw what I saw at the hospital in like a institutionalized way where people met day after day and they could talk so openly about their situation. The woman who had an addiction, whom I have already mentioned, she had said that her whole life she had been working 2 hours. She had been working all day for her children to survive, but she slept 2 hours per day. And when I asked her who that person who she was gonna meet outside was, she replied, no, this is not my husband. Maybe I would say he is the father of my children. So this woman had told that she had been here, like in the place 20 years ago, and how things were so much different in a bad way. She talked about how things changed in 20 years, how infrastructure, humaneness, kindness, compassion started to gradually take over those 20 years that she had been missing in the psychiatry. And she also had reported in a group discussion, which was a large group discussion, how she had never had such level of organization in her entire life, which had been in the psychiatry, because we had morning exercise every morning for 30 minutes. Even if you were late for 1 minute, you weren't getting the signature, which you then had to report to the doctor who gave you the drugs for you to stay there and then discuss with her or him about whether it is acceptable to be late and how many times, if it is. So I mentioned multiple times that I had been out of the closed unit once. I had been out of that place twice. Because there's a level of intimacy that I want to share with you, and that is, I got out the first time, and then after a few days, because my roommates had been so full of everything, they just they shared everything. I didn't even want to know, and so I left the hospital, but I mistakenly had not read the rules thoroughly, so I left the hospital without warning, and then the police came after me that evening, and my father had me in my room, which was closed, before him for hours. And I was also not hungry, I was not sleepy much. I had a fever. And I went home, and I later told the hospital doctors that I actually had a fever. I have proof, I have a photo with 40 degrees Celsius, and then they still kept me in the closed unit. And the second time I went back, I had a woman literally about, like, I know what it looks like when a person is in the active process of leaving this earth, and I couldn't sleep there the second time, so somehow I survived it because I was in my follicular phase as opposed to my luteal phase, which happened because the first time I had been in the closed unit, the guy I mentioned, who I really enjoy working out with, he one night he wrote me a handwritten letter with full capital letters asking me the question of whether I wanted to go to the UK with him right then. And that was the only thing, besides having had read the Bible at that time, Genesis in particular, that made me able to lay in bed and sleep for long enough that my body got the signal, okay, it is time to let go. So the next day I wake up, the guy I mentioned already told me how calm I felt, how much more calmer I felt, and I told him it was because I got my period that night. And by the way, before that, I even tried to sleep on the bathroom floor, but the woman responsible for the people there who was doing the night shift came after me. Obviously, she found me in the corridor where the tables were lined up. It's not in the bathroom, but she basically threatened me that unless I went back to my bed where this dying woman was lying and walking around, I had to accept being reported back to the doctors. So what I did was I got my period in the closed unit the first time. However, afterwards I missed a period much later when I finally got out after like 1 to 2 months of hospitalization. So it was ironic because delayed gratification even seemed to work here. I missed a period not during the time I was hospitalized, but afterward. Then my period came back, but it's never been the same since because of my body functioning differently, which actually affected everything. So because I had got my period in the closed unit, I was fresh enough and calm enough, so to speak, to not suffer through the experience, because my hormones were allowing me to be grateful enough, to be calm enough, to sleep enough, without being like pessimistic about everything and just wanting to sleep unconditionally. And as I done it, I managed to get outside. I also experienced a long weekend in the closed unit, so I was in so much uncertainty, and the fact that you're there not knowing when you were gonna get out, like Andrew Tate when he was in the Romanian jail. I think that is such abuse that not many things can match, to tell you the truth, because uncertainty is abuse. Okay, so if you go into one of these places and are not told when you were going to get out, or are told but maybe approximate times, it's really cruel. It's like you are starting to wonder whether you even want to live, like, so. And mind you, all the people who are in these places, they are in uncertainty. So I have told an upside about the open unit, where you can actually use your phone. I only had a phone with buttons, so no smartphone intentionally even before. But I was not interested in using my phone. I was interested in educating myself, trying to cope. And it just so happened that my best way to cope was education. So I asked my father and family to bring me readables. But what I found in the open unit was that they were a bit looser. Like they were a bit less strict with meal times and schedules. But we had actual classes to go to, but they were so far away from each other that there was a high chance of getting bored in the meantime. So I remember there were another few people who were playing this board game every single day while sedated, like on medication and on high doses of medication. They were playing every day. And I remember when I really felt like I wanted to join, I remember I want to join. I remember thinking I want to join, not because what they do seems so fun, but because what I can do otherwise seems like so much suffering. And I remember wanting to cope by playing with them. And that's when I realized how important community actually was, because I was already so tired of being introduced to new people every single day and putting in the effort of putting my best foot forward every single time, because I had so much of that during my life, and I'm sure that I'm not alone. Like, this is the world we live in now, but just having those few people who you can trust is priceless, especially in economies like these where trust is like earned. Like, it's not free, It's crazy.